So welcome, good morning. My name is Tevin Laxer. I'm the director of the Sacramento Jewish Film Festival, and we welcome you all today to our panel discussion about the film, The Fourth Window, and the life and works of Israeli author Amos Oz. The Jewish Film Festival is a program of the Jewish Federation of the Sacramento region. The program is being recorded. The film will be presented by us between March 8th and March 14th. So this is rather a novelty for us. We are presenting a Zoom discussion about the film and the author prior to most of you being able to actually watch the film. But hopefully, some of you are familiar with the author, and maybe you've read some of Amos's books, since he's a very prominent Israeli author. Again, March 8 to 14, and we'll be posting in our chat links to our website. The film, as you'll see, it presents a series of conversations with Oz's biographer, Nurit Gretz. And it has biographical passages, conversations with a variety of people in his life, and he's telling his last story. So we have two wonderful panel members today. We have the filmmaker, Yair Qedar. He's a filmmaker and civil rights activist. He has directed over 20 films, including Ivrim, the Hebrews, which is a documentary project on the Hebrew and Jewish literary canon, centers on portraits of Israeli writers from the 17th century to the present days. We also have with us Adar Cohn, who happens to be married to Bnei Israel's visiting rabbi, Rabbi Galit. Adar is the chair of the Teacher Education Department at the Seymour Fox School of Education, the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He's currently a visiting scholar at UC Davis, and he's the senior Israeli educational consultant for ARZA, the Union for Reform Judaism. I'd like to present our panel, and they will be discussing the film and Amos Oz. Welcome.
Okay, so welcome everybody. Good morning, Boker Tov. I'm very excited to be here, and it was also a great opportunity for me to watch the movie and to have this discussion with Yair. As toda. And maybe before we discuss the movie itself, I think that we need maybe to think or to talk a bit about the broader context of this film, the Ivrim series, the Hebrews, as Devin mentioned, which allows us as Israeli audience, international audience, to be exposed to biographical documentary films about prominent writers in the field of Hebrew and Jewish literature. And Yair, you were leading this long-term project since 2009, and I think it seems to me that it's not only an artistic project, but also kind of a cultural statement that has a social purpose. So if you can just elaborate about that, talking about this broader context of this particular film.
Thank you, Adar. Good morning, everyone. Good evening from Tel Aviv. It's dark now and it's raining. The Hebrews project began around 2009, and the idea was to create a series of films, documentary films with a combination of documentary and biography of the greatest Israeli writers, also later Israeli and Jewish writers. For each film, I invite Israeli artists to embark on a journey, artistic journey with me, to create a film which is a homage, but also is the life story and also samples the highlights of their art, of their work. The first film was about Leah Goldberg. Later on about Yona Volach, Bialik was the third film. Since then, already 16 films were made. And it's not only a journey with many dozens of Israeli artists, animators, musicians, editors, etc., but it also some kind of attempt to rewrite the Israeli canon So it is not the most important or successful writers, but also I'm trying to correct the representation. So I also, a more marginal figure are included, not only Bialik, the national poet, but also Jacqueline Kahanov, the Mizrahi essayist, was one of the first people to write about tensions of Mizrahi and Sephardi in Israel, in Palestine, already in the 30s of the previous century, or in about the feminist gap, a film about Abraham Sutzkever, the greatest Yiddish writer, with an amazing life story, but spent 60 years of his life in Tel Aviv. Shalom Shabazi, the Yemenite liturgical, spiritual and poetic leader who died 400 years ago. Another characters, David Fogel, Abu Shurun, Rachel, the poetess. The film, I produced all the film and I directed less than half of them. Are shown in Israel in many places and worldwide. I think some of the films, the earliest film, will be also in academic course in the new Leatherman organization in Berkeley. But Rachel and David Bill, which will start next month. The two new films in the series, the late films, are about Amos Oz and about Abi Yehoshua. Amos Oz you will see soon, and Abi Yehoshua perhaps next year. And currently we're working on films about Sigmund Freud, Baruch Spinoza, and Karl Marx. So it is a very, very challenging project, which I invite you to be introduced to.
So moving to discuss this film about Amos Oz, so I had so many questions for you, Yair, about the process of making this film. So maybe I will begin with asking you what attracted you in his character. Meaning, why did you want to make a film about him? And since Amos Oz is such a well-known public figure in Israel, so weren't you worried to try to innovate something about him that haven't been said or haven't been shown yet in the Israeli, for the Israeli audience? So what really attracted you to do a film about him?
Am I worried? Yes, I was very, very worried that I will not make a good film or not be original. So it was, yes, I was very worried through the whole process. But after making films about the characters, the personalities which I mentioned, in the day that he died, I decided to make a film about him, but to create a film about the writer, the symbol of Hebrew and Israeli literature in the modern era, the window to our culture. So I thought it should be included in the project. But then after they signed it, then came the questions and the challenges. And so I think there were two stages of the making of the film. The first one was to collect the archives. I was working with Nili Feller, the editor, which is a fantastic partner. And we watched dozens and dozens of hours. He was documented for hundreds of hours in Israeli archives and worldwide. He's documented for the last 60 or 70 years. And in the second stage, we search for the angle through which angle we can tell the story. What would be the original narrative? And then we found the recordings of Nurit Gertz. Also, I would like to make another point about another challenge. He's such a wonderful storyteller, and he wrote his autobiography in A Tale of Love and Darkness. He did the work. The biography is out. So how can we make something new? But then we discovered the recordings with Nurit Gertz. Nurit Gertz is a longtime friend, a researcher of Amos's work. And he chose her to write his last biography. And they worked together through the phone calls. They talked for hours and hours. I have about 110 pages of just their conversations. And this is the basis for his last story, his last narrative. And I got access to this material very slowly. It took me about a year until I got the approval and trust of Nurit Gertz. But then I knew I have access to the last story that Amos Oz told. But also I have another privilege. He died before the biography is out. So I got access to the raw materials, the unedited materials of the last story of Amos Oz. And then we decided to make a film out of two storylines. The biography, the literary, the personal, the political biography, it's one storyline. And the second storyline is those conversations in which we discover a new Amos Oz, fragile and intimate as we never seen before.
Did you had any like predecisions that you've made as the filmmaker before you approached after getting to know all the material you had? But I know that sometimes, you know, when you make a film, so you decide several things before you approach to do the film itself. So did you had any such pre-decisions?
I had many, but they're lost during the process. It took about 2.5 years to make the film, and I think the strength of the film is by your ability to let go of your preconceptions, what I thought and what I felt about Amos Oz. So not many things are left from the beginning. So it's a process of getting to know him, getting to know his intimate life, deciding what should be in, what should be out, and what is the story to tell with was a great challenge. So many eyes on Amos Oz, so many eyes on the film, and the film is the most successful among the Hebrews film in terms that it was sold to 3 or 4 television stations and shown in about 15 countries. So it's many millions are watching the film in its 2 versions, the long version and the short version. But we had the luck of having Nurit Gertz with us to give us the recordings, to be interviewed to the film. And, you know, we had hand in hand, we walked hand in hand through the making of the film. And of course, many challenges with the COVID and some Oz family affairs that came up during the last year. Many challenges, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll get back to some of them later. Okay. I think that this is a
preview.
Yeah, I think this is a great point in our talk to watch maybe the first few minutes of the film. Actually, it's not the trailer. The trailer we are going to watch later, but you are going, since you are here in this talk, so you'll have the privilege to watch the first 3 minutes of the film. And I think that, as you mentioned, this is like an introduction to the narrative of the film, to the narrative that you are presenting us. And so let's watch it, and then maybe I'll ask you a question about this part of the film.
Certainly.
אני שומעת.
אני אגיד לך משהו, נורית. אם אני אמות לפנייך, ואני מקווה שזה יהיה ככה, לא שאני רוצה למות, אני לא רוצה למות.
לא, הכי טוב, אתה יודע, יש סרט של האחים טביאני.
לא, חכי, לא שמעת מה שאני רוצה להגיד לך.
כן, אני מחכה.
כן. אם אני אמות לפנייך, את יכולה לכתוב ביוגרפיה קצרה שלי.
טוב, בשביל זה אני צריכה לדבר איתך עוד.
יכולה לכתוב עליי כל מה שאת יודעת, ואת יודעת הרבה מאוד. אל תכתבי רק דברים טובים. תכתבי גם זה בן אדם מפונק, תכתבי גם זה בן אדם רודף כבוד, תכתבי גם זה בן אדם שאוהב מדי לשמוע את עצמו. תכתבי שהבן אדם הזה זה נשף מסכות מהלב. תכתבי הכל, אל תכתבי שיר הלב, אל תכתבי שיר אהבה. תכתבי. תכתבי מה שרק את יכולה לכתוב ואף אחד אחר לא יכול לכתוב.
כל שנות ילדותי הראשונות גרתי בשכונת כרם אברהם בירושלים. אבל חייתי לא שם, אלא הייתי טועה מסוחרר ביערות וירטואליים. יערות של מילים, בבקתות של מילים, באחו של מילים. מה שהקיף אותי לא נחשב. כל מה שנחשב היה עשוי ממילים. היות שאין לי אח או אחות, היות שמשחר ילדותי מגלמים הוריי בהתמכרות כזו את תפקיד קהל המעריצים, לא נותר לי אלא לעלות על הבמה, לתפוס לבדי את מלוא אורכה ורוחבה, ולהקסים את הקהל הרחב. וכך החל מגיל 3 או 4.
Oh, no. Can you please go on for one more minute?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yes, okay, sorry.
אם לא לפני כן, אני כבר הצגת יחיד. מונודרמה. מופע ללא הפסקה. כוכב במות בודד המחויב כל הזמן לאלתר, לרתק, לרגש, להפליא ולשעשע בלי הרף את קהלו. מן הבוקר עד הערב עליו לגנוב ולגנוב את ההצגה.
כל סופר רציני שאני פוגש ומכיר קצת יותר לעומק, אני יכול להבין איך
Okay. So I hope you had a good opportunity to get curious about the film, the whole film, and thinking about those few first minutes of the film. And watching, maybe I watched, of course, the whole film and a bit after that. So there are like two very important statements, I think, that Amos Oz himself is saying here, or we hear what he wrote about himself. One of them, he's telling, and regrets, his biographer, he's telling her, write it down, I'm a walking masquerade. And I'm, as it was said here, I'm on the stage with my one-man show ever since I was 3 or 4 years old. And another statement which comes a bit after that, he says, a person cannot become a writer without a wound in his soul from his childhood. And then I think that, and about that, Yair, I would like to maybe to elaborate about how do you think this is like the key to understand Oz as a person, as a writer, this wound in his childhood that he had? And of course, you can tell us it's not a mystery film, so we can talk about that. It is described later that his mother's suicide when he was only 12 was this big wound. And I want to ask you, do you think this is the key in your film? This is the key to understand his character. And do you feel like he says that he's kind of a one-man show, that like for all his life he was pretending to be someone that he wished to become, but maybe it wasn't him? This is like a complexity here in his image.
Amos was a very, very complex and bright person, and I cannot sum it up in a few sentences. I'm holding much respect to him, but I would say that we had, in the many hours that we listened to, the hundreds of hours we listened to his archives, we find him very repetitive. In the early stage of his life, he chose some narratives, some answers to the question, which he repeated all the time. There's some kind of a theatrical element of him, but since the age of 20 is in this international spotlight. So he's a sort of a star that gives again the same answers, also protected somehow with these answers and with this repetition. So in a way, it was like hard to find him sincere or not working with the notion of Amos Oz. It was hard to get to the crux of someone, to his, I don't know, breakings, perhaps, to find him more human. It was perhaps, too perfect. He spoke wonderfully. He was such a good-looking guy. And we were searching for these cracks, which we found in the recordings, where he says, what is he saying? I'm a walking masquerade. I'm saying, I'm too working for my image. I'm too theatrical. And he's saying to Nuri, try to listen to me, to what is beyond that. So I think these recordings gave us access to something that is beyond, to a more intimate Amos Oz, perhaps, I think. But also it's possible that presenting a more vulnerable image is still in charge of this image. He still created this image, and this is the new image that he created. So I'm not sure in what sense he's created his vulnerable image, or is it really vulnerable? I don't know. It's a riddle to me. And as for the wound, he declared that so many times, and I think this is the mantra of Amos Oz. I lost my mother when I was 12. This is the secret which I revealed in A Tale of Love and Darkness. Every writer needs a wound. This is my wound. And I think in so many ways, he never recovered from this trauma. So we have this contradiction, this great wound trauma on the one hand, and on the other hand, we have amazing success story. 45 languages, we translated to 45 languages. It's much more countries than 45 countries. Very successful Israeli writer in so many countries, and also a political figure. So we have these two edges, which contains the secret of Amos Oz. And I don't think it is revealed enough in the film. I think he had his defenses, but I think it allowed us to get a little bit closer to this persona, I think, perhaps.
Yeah, and I also think that since you were using a lot of documentary or interviews with him from former years, so of course his being exposure about this wound in his life came only when he was over 50. Like when he published Tale of Love and Darkness, it was 2002 or 2003. So it was after nearly maybe 35 years of being a very well-known writer. And only then he allowed himself to expose that. So I think it was, and watching your film is very interesting to see how you came to pick like parts of interviews with him from former years that are like hinting to that, even before he was talking about that openly.
It's a wonderful observation. I haven't thought about it, so I'm glad I have no observation about my film. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and another maybe a question about making the film. So in one of the quotes that you brought in the film, so he says himself something like that. He says, "I do not want people to ever get into my kitchen," and he intends, of course, not his kitchen where the food is, but not to trace the writing process. And not to start ask questions. What were you thinking in the beginning, and what then? And he also mentions that he do not keep manuscripts, and even I think he has a story there that he's describing how he destroyed some of his manuscripts because he says, "I don't want people to trace how I did it." And I was thinking that making a film like this is going against this statement. Yeah, because you are trying to bring us all to his kitchen or to his private rooms, and maybe I don't know. I would be very interested to hear your opinion here. Maybe I think in the end, towards the end of his life, he actually wanted the opposite. He wanted people to understand the processes beneath of his writing. So can you say something about it? That like
he said
bringing us to his kitchen.
Yeah, he told Nuri that he don't want people to go into his kitchen on the one hand. On the other hand, he all the time he let people in his kitchen. The journalists that came into this kitchen, the editors, the other film crews. There is some contradictions here between the facade and reality. Sometimes he let people in, sometimes not. After he died, I came and I sat with his wife, with his widow in the kitchen, and we agreed to make the film. I got the approval of the family. So I don't know exactly how to think about it. On the one hand, don't enter my kitchen. On the other hand, I destroyed my narrative, but then there are some do exist. On the one hand, I do not keep any paper if I don't publish it. On the other hand, the family house is full of manuscripts and things that are unpublished. So I can say there is some interesting gap here. And I think it is very normal for a writer to have a facade and to have things that he says. And it is not my role to check, what is the difference between the facade and reality. But I can say that sometimes there is a small gap.
Yeah. Okay. And I think that now maybe we can watch the trailer of the movie. So everybody here, our audience here, you can have like a broader perspective about the whole film, and then we'll keep on with a few other questions.
אם היית שואלת אותי באקדח לרקה, תגיד לי במילה אחת על מה כתבת בכל הספרים שלך, הייתי אומר על משפחות. תגיד לי בשתי מילים, הייתי אומר על משפחות אומללות.
He seemed like a figure to sort of biblical qualities.
My Michael was really the Israeli Madame Bovary. He was huge. I wish I could remember all of the 40 countries.
He became the chronicler of an entire country.
נביא חילוני כזה, מישהו שהוא בעצם סמן מוסרי.
בהרבה מקרים הוא חזה את הנולד.
Amos is like a rock star. It's electric.
יכול להיות שאני קצת רוצח כשאני כותב סיפורים. אם בן אדם נהיה סופר, הוא נהיה סופר בגלל פצע. אבל בלי איזה פצע, אין סופר.
ברור שהפצע הקשה מכל הוא ההתאבדות של אמא שלך כשהיית בן 12.
אם אני אמות לפנייך, את יכולה לכתוב עליי כל מה שאת יודעת. ואת יודעת הרבה מאוד.
Artists require a lot of freedom to explore the darker side of things. These things were probably at conflict in his soul.
אני מוצא שהמשפחה זה התופעה הכי מסתורית בעולם.
כל חייו הוא מנסה לעשות הכל כדי לא לאמלל אף אחד. והנה, את הילדה שלו, שהוא כל כך אוהב, הוא ימלל אותה בסופו של דבר. מה זה אם לא טרגדיה?
אני חושב שמילים זה עסק ביש. עסק ביש.
Okay, so now I think that we got even more curious than before, and I think we just saw here like the two big themes of your film. One is Amos Oz's like political side, his ideology, and being what was Edgar Qedar was telling here, like a secular prophet of the Israeli society. And the other big theme is dealing with families, and of course with his own family and all the complexities about that. So maybe let's talk about these two themes. I know that we are all very curious about his family and what's happened there, but let us begin with the political side or the ideological side of him. So in the film and also here in the trailer, it is said that he was like a secular prophet. He was a moral marker in the Israeli society. He had the look of a poster boy of the nation reborn, the Israeli nation reborn. And of course, he was very much involved in political life in Israel. You mentioned, or it is mentioned in the film, his maybe uncontrollable tendency to be around leaders in Israel, around the world. And you bring also in the film a lot of criticism about that related to his artwork. Like, for example, Edgar Keret, who is also an Israeli very famous writer, much younger, of course, than Amos Oz. So he claims that it's like a betrayal in the literature. He brings his and Ariel Hirschfeld, the professor, literature professor in the Hebrew University, he says that Amos Oz subordinated his work of art to his ideology. So the combination of being a writer and being someone who very much involved in politics is being seen here as it's kind of critic about that. So I wanted to ask you, why was it important for you to include this criticism in the film, and do you feel the same like what they said?
I come from literature, not filmmaking. I studied only Hebrew literature on the one hand. On the other hand, I'm not a critic at all, and I'm not such a critical person. But when I make films, I'm trying to make a round figure, yes? One of the biggest danger in this film was to create hagiography, how do you say, hagiography, yes? A film about a saint, painting all the pink colors. And I wanted to represent the many sides of Amos Oz and how he's perceived, and in a delicate and a balanced way. And I invited some of the leading intellectuals and writers in Israel, and some perhaps in even bigger circles, perhaps in the Jewish world, to share their thoughts about the phenomenon of Amos Oz, his literature, and also his political ideology, the ideology and the relationship between those two layers, the two sides that made Amos Oz. Yes, it cannot. They stand together. It's two legs of the same creature, of the same person. And Nicole Krauss and Uri Alter was there, but he's not in the film eventually, and Simon Shama and Edgar Keret, David Grossman, A.B. Yoshua. So I went to the big, as much as I could reach them, and they agreed to be part of the film. It was pre-corona, just before the sky was stopped. I flew to the UK, to the United States, and in Israel I traveled, and I had conversations. What do you think of Amos Oz? And there was some stages in that, because beginning, there is the mourning process, and there's 5 stages. The preliminary stages are the one when you glorify, and then there is several stages there. And I did some interviews in the beginning and some later. And it's a bit risky to make a film about a person who just died, yes? Because the perception is changing. You cannot evaluate what is his place in the canon, what is his literary worth or political worth, what will become of him, and especially in these days which are more hard and fanatic and surprising and crazy. People can be deleted very quickly from the canon. So we had a very interesting work in trying to weave the changing mourning notions of Amos Oz from 3 countries into one film, and without making neither a criminal or a saint, neither a hypocrite or a mediocre, with continuing to respecting him and loving him and trying to show the complexity of Amos Oz, which was the most complex and clever and secretive than many of his commentators. So in terms of Hebrew literature, I actually invited all his, people, the main Israeli writers come and talk about Amos Oz in the film. And it's very interesting, sometimes to analyze how do they speak. Do they pay tribute to the king, or are they trying to take his place? So it's very interesting to watch the film once and watch it again and to see what are the interesting subtext there. So it's also, this is the funeral of the king. The king is dead. Come and tell us about the king while people are trying to take new position in front of this kingdom of Hebrew literature. So it was fascinating for me to do it, to see it, and to see the film now in relation to what's happening in the cultural discourse about Amos Oz now in Israel.
Yeah. So maybe using those metaphors, I think that in the Israeli literature arena, we are talking about the three tenors, right? We have Oz, we have A.B. Yehoshua, and we have David Grossman. And it's fascinating that the two others are in your film and they are talking about him. So it's I think it's also very, very interesting to think about him from the perspective of other very, very famous and well-known writers, and especially those three which were like the same, more or less like the same period of time.
I don't know who invented these three tenors, but these are the three tenors. Amos Oz was the number one, A.B. Yehoshua was the number two, and
David Grossman, yeah.
And not among the three tenors, not David Grossman is the prince, yes, would be the next king. The age of giants ended with Oz and Yehoshua, and Grossman is still younger. And it's also interesting to mention that there are three films about those characters coming out together. The Amos Oz film, which I made, the A.B. Yehoshua film, which I made, and David Grossman, which Adi Arbel created, and also in the film festival, and I recommend that you will watch it. So you see three portraits of very, very different people. I would say Grossman and Oz are similar in a way that they think of literature as a holy shrine, yes, art as holy process, while A.B. Yehoshua is a more secular, down-to-earth, honest, warm, very, very charming and charismatic person. I love him very much, as you can see in the third film, perhaps next year. So it's interesting to see the three films together, and I hope David Grossman is still young, and I hope A.B. Yehoshua will be around for some more years.
Yeah. Also, the other theme in the film and also in the trailer that we've just seen is the family issues and families as a whole. As he says that he was writing all his life about families or about unhappy families. This is the core of his work. But if we were now in Israel, so everybody in Israel is not talking now about Amos Oz, the writer, or Amos Oz, the politician, or the ideologist, or whatever. But nowadays, it's all the Israelis are talking now only about this issue with his daughter. That she published a book a year ago, his second daughter, and accusing him of abusing her as a child. And everybody in Israel is very emotional about that. Like, whose narrative do we believe? There are two narratives inside the family, one daughter and the other narrative of his other children. And also, I think in the film, he says he's talking about that with no regrets, and he says it's like a knife that spins all the time in my soul. And she's saying, no regret is saying, as we just saw in the trailer, this is a tragic family story of accusations and a request for forgiveness, but the forgiveness was not given. Yes, but
yes.
by his.
Please don't tell the whole secrets of the film.
Yeah.
Leave some secrets.
So yeah, of course.
Yes,
so
okay. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you if you hesitated about putting this story in the film, because one might think this is like gossip. Why was it important for you to put this in the film, this story with his daughter?
Who said it's gossip? No, okay.
No, I think one may think that it's like gossip.
I made the film for about 2 years, and I finished the film in February. Yes? I finished the film on the weekend, one weekend in February. It was Saturday, and I celebrated with my team, finishing the master. And on Sunday, it was published in the Haaretz website and magazine that Galia published a book accusing him of physically and mentally abusing her during her childhood. So then I started getting phone calls from all the investors, Israeli TV, German TV, the film fund, etc. You must do something with it. And it will be a sin to create a biography about Amos Oz with deleting such a thing that happened in reality and became a big thing in culture and in the media. I would not commit such a sin and I actually committed a sin or not, I didn't have a choice, yes? This is the new narrative of Amos Oz. And it began like a giant thing, you know, in the Wikipedia, in Google searches. Amos Oz was leading with his daughter the searches for many, many days. And it became a really big affair. But not only the size of the affair, but the content of the affair bothered me. And I had to question myself, what is the person that I'm making the film about? Is he a person that abuses his daughter? Do I have the data? Can I be a judge? So I had a real serious moral dilemma, what to do with the film. And I had conversation, you know, with the Israeli broadcaster, and they said, what would have happened if you make a film about Eichmann? It's a good idea to make a film about Eichmann. I said, it's a wonderful film idea to make a film about Eichmann, but Amos Oz is not an Eichmann. But what is the amount of the sin that he committed, which we cannot judge? So with this moral dilemma, we spent another 6 months in labor, which is in the editing room. And we had to juggle with Galia, who had certain demands toward the film, and with the other side of the family, which is the widow and the 2 other children, Fanny and Daniel, which were supporting Oz post-mortem and saying Galia is inventing things. And the film was in the middle of it. So how would I come out of this problem? I had 2 things that came to my help. The first one was since 2015, he talked about the thing with Galia, with Nurit, saying, I know I was bad for my daughter. I don't know what I did. I'm sorry. Galia did not receive his sorry, did not forgive him. And his attempts to understand what did he do wrong while dying from cancer. So after the thing with Galia exploded, Nurit gave me the recordings of Amos telling his side. So I had new material. I was also in touch with Galia to agree with her. How do you want your accusation to be represented in the film? And I agreed that you will do ABC, and I did the ABC. Not being a judge and not knowing what happened, I was representing the side and serving the spectators with a dilemma as it is. And finally, I had Nurit Gertz, the wonderful Nurit Gertz, which gave the narrative that includes, that connects both traumas of Amos Oz. The first trauma of his mother dying while he was 12, and the second trauma towards the end of his life, the trauma with his daughter accusing him, not understanding. He did not understand what he did wrong. I don't know if he's guilty or not. He did not understand. And the worst thing that happened to him, both sides of his life, his mother leaving him and his beloved daughter leaving him, not talking to him. So that is what represented in the film, with all this moral complexity it's inside. I'm not happy about it. I wish I had a film without moral dilemmas, without affairs of abuse, but it happened in reality, and we're documenting things that are happening in reality, and we try to be as balanced as possible. And I know that the family and Galia are satisfied with how balanced the film is. And you know, it's so tragic. Yesterday, you know, Ovda is the most popular news show in Israel. So Fania and Daniel showed their version, accusing Galia of inventing. So the struggle with the heirs of the Oz family continue in the media. It's like a bloody battle. It's not so nice. It's very not nice to watch. And but it continues.
Yeah,
I cannot say anything good about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a very difficult decision to make, and I think I would use, when everybody here will watch the movie, of course you can think yourself how did Yair what did he did with what did we do with this issue, this topic. But I would say it's not about balancing, it's more about showing the complexity. I think that you made it really well in the movie, so we understand that we cannot understand, and this is, I think, about, and this reflects somehow Amos Oz writing about families and about families' tragedies, not about his family, but about families at all. So it's like it's very interesting that it's also in the film and in his life. Since we have only a few minutes left, I think this is the time to open the floor for questions from the participants here. So you're invited to write it on the chat, or to present any question that you have for Yair. I have a lot of questions, of course, but I want like other people to participate as well. So let's give everybody a minute or two to think about a question or to write it on the chat, and we can have Yair answer us. While everybody is doing that, maybe just tell us what was the most surprising thing that you've been through during the process of making this film.
What was very surprising, but it's not about Amos Oz, it's about the archives. I found the treasure in the archives, which is very surprising and gave us a lot of happiness. You know, in the Tale of Love and Darkness, it tells the story of the night of the vote in November 1947, deciding to give Israel to the Jews and the dividing of the country. And I used this part in the film, this story about this night. And usually in archives, you see Jewish people dance hora, celebrating the winning the UN resolution vote. But that is like the end result. There is no footage of what happened earlier. And we got a still photos treasure in Israel Museum, or someone who documented the hours before that, of the anxiety. We don't know what will be the answer, what will be the resolution, the very fatal one. And we got these treasures of stills, and it's in the film. And you can see, you know, people in Palestine, some immigrants, some locals in the streets of Jerusalem, very, very worried. And it's a beautiful moment that I shared. So it's like, I was very happy to find it.
Yeah, so it's also being an historian here, not only a filmmaker. Fascinating. Okay, so I see that we already have here one question from Dorothy and Brian. So they ask, how can a film capture the literary legacy of an author such as Oz?
Well, the answer, if the film captured or not the literary legacy, the specter. I cannot be say if it did capture. I tried to capture, and I tried to capture as I tried in other film. The film is a combination. This is not a regular documentary. It's a combination of archives, of a paragraph from his literature read by an actor. And while I use archives to illustrate those literary passages, and many interviews from many angles. So you think about like a collage or puzzle, which gives you a taste, like evening of tasting, like wine tasting. You taste his literature, you taste his life, you feel him through the archives, through his voice, and it gives you some kind of break. You spent an evening with a sort of tasting of Amos Oz, as near as you can get from a post-mortem documentary film made after his death. And it's also very good to use good people that are interviewed and good archives and good quotations from Amos Oz. But if it succeeds or not, please, you'll be the judge of that.
Thank you.
How much was done in the postmodern? How much?
Yeah.
Was it? Andrea, Roseanne?
Yeah, Andrea has a question here. Tevin, do you want me to read the questions, or we'll let the people themselves ask them?
I can read it if you want.
Okay, yeah, sure.
I'm curious how much damage to Oz's reputation do you think was done by the accusations after his death from his daughter?
Oh, I think it's sadly quite severe, but it's very hard to know the extent. I heard he suffered someplace in North America, a cancel culture, not longer taught, books thrown away. And in Israel, there are two camps. It was very interesting to see when he died. So people from the right and from the left, settlers and others came praising him. Like it was a moment of reunion. And that maintained until the book of his daughter. And then you see two camps, the modern, perhaps sort of Me Too, feminist, minority and left wing, and the cultural elite in Israel, which never loved Amos Oz very much. The intellectuals never were into Amos Oz. And on the other hand, so it's happening now. It is severe and it will be damaged. How damaged? We do not know. I was thinking in the beginning of the film that there was two masterpieces by Amos Oz. How do you say, like a camel that has two humps? Yeah. So Amos Oz is a camel with two humps. The first hump is My Michael. The second hump is A Tale of Love and Darkness. And as a lover of literature, I believe these two texts will last. We keep it in the canon. It will be masterpieces for many, many years. But you know who prophecy was given to, so. Yes.
Thank you. Orna, yes, you want to present your question, please.
Yes.
There is a little echo. Yeah.
So I'll read it, Orna, because you have a lot of feedback. Orna asks, why do you think that only his mother's suicide is mentioned as the tragedy in his life, and not the fact that his father was distant, had an affair with his secretary who he later married, and did not want Amos to live with them?
Yeah. I think this is a very fascinating psychological question that is very hard to answer. But I think the main trauma, you know, his mother dying, they didn't tell him that, didn't let him go to the funeral. He didn't have any mourning process. And they say that one of the things that happened with an adult trauma, post-trauma, is narcissism. Yes. So I think he had a big thing with his mother, and it's terrible thing what happened with his father. We show it in the film. So his mother is leaving him, deserting him. Later, the same thing is done by his father. Yes, but he had the opportunity to make peace with his father in later years. So perhaps this makes a difference. In the film, he says his father threw away to the kibbutz. And you know, he weekend, he had nowhere to go. He had almost no clothes to wash. It's terrible. I think the father has a very But complex relationship with the father is a good material to many things.
And one last question, what effect did Amos Oz's politics have on his reputation as an author?
I think, Bully is A.B. Yoshua, and he's a very, very honest person. And he said, and he's the same generation as Amos. He's a bit bigger than him, older than him. And he said, our generation, the previous generation was not less talented, not less bright than us, but we had the luck, the fantastic lottery luck of the 1967 war. All eyes of the world are on us. We object to Israel policy. We became heroes in all the salons, literary salons in the liberal world, in all the Western world. And we gained a lot of reputation that we played with. And they were activists, both of them, for many years, honest activism. But this thing very much supported their literature. It is undeniable that it helped a lot. And it's interesting to see, the peace movement, the left in Israel is a very hard crisis for some years. So Amos Oz is suffering from all sides, from the crisis in the left and in the peace movement and the idea of the two-state solution, and on the other hand, suffering from accusations from his daughter. This is not good times to Amos Oz now, but in previous years, it made them fly, made them very, very successful, which is wonderful. There's nothing wrong with being successful and being activists, supporting peace in your country, and also getting more readers to your literature and vice versa. I think this is very good, and that's one of the secrets of the great Amos Oz.
Okay, thank you so much.
So we have one more question.
We have another question. Yeah, please.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
can you talk a bit more about how you personally dealt with the stress of trying to create a fair depiction of a very famous person during a period of commotion about the subject?
Oh, you mean before Galia or after Galia?
After.
After, okay. So actually there were tensions before that. Galia was not speaking to her family, and it was known that she's going to publish. We thought it's like an interview in the newspaper. And while I made a film, it was the tensions were around her. People were secretive, were defensive, and I had to walk like in a minefield. But it was much harder after the thing exploded. And I'm a kind of like official presenter of the Amos Oz. I was given the keys to tell the official biography. So I was, the target of many tensions, of many people that wanted things from me to draw this kind of picture or another kind of picture. And luckily I had, partners like the editor or Nuri Gertz, where we thought we should be, we thought of how we can be balanced in our way without tendency. We refuse to be judges. It's very, very important. The issue is out in Israel, and everybody is requested to choose a side. We do not want to choose a side. This is not a court. We're not judges. And we want to find a way, delicate is not the word, honestly, realistically, to present what happened, to present her accusation, and to present him with his broken voice in the recording, with the cancer treatment, not understanding what happened, but understand that he was doing bad, that he will not speak to his beloved daughter anymore. So this is very, hard material to deal with emotionally. And we had to weave and be balanced all the time. We had to breathe all the time. We tried to breathe all the time. Yeah. And I think the film suffered from it a little bit in Israel. People boycotted the film. People did not come to the screenings because people are angry with Amos Oz, with the fallen dream or fantasy. And he was so, beautiful and amazing and eloquent. So people projected so many things on him that he's not a person. I see there is some more questions.
There's one more question. Kevin, do you want to keep going or do you want to wrap it up? You want to keep going? Okay. Why do you think Galia did not reconcile with her father before his death? Who was responsible for that and why? I mean, I know you just said that you're not going to be a judge, so it's kind of a hard question to ask when you just said, you know, that you were really trying to avoid taking the role of being a judge. But
yeah, you know, Galia is very, very angry with his father. She's not forgiving her father. And she has a right not to forgive her father and to tell her story. But the story is completely contradictory to what the rest of the family think. But that's okay also. A sister can feel and sense very different things from the rest of the family. I do not want to judge, but I can say that I have my ideas and I am close to some of the people. My sister was in a kibbutz for a while with Galia and the family. And Galia is the best friend of my two elderly sisters. So I didn't share with her the film. We don't speak for years, but I heard things there and I heard things from the family. And I think there's many, many layers. It's a real Israeli tragedy that keeps on going and is happening now. And all sides are very opinionated about their position and about their justice. You know, it's very interesting. He was a peacemaker, Amos Oz. Yes, you should talk, interact, and the family is at war. And it's interesting to see, you know, he's a high control person, Amos Oz. He controlled his career, he controlled his family. What does it mean? It meant that he contained the tensions. And, you know, a few months after he's gone, the structure of control is out, and then you see what happens when no one maintains the balances and keeps the tensions balanced. So that's me saying from my observing. And I'm trying to observe and not to feel. I don't want to be drawn to the feelings of the just sides in this war. And I think this is really my right not to be a side, not to judge.
Sounds like Israel's Rashomon.
Absolutely, yes. It's an unexpected Rashomon. Yes, a sad Rashomon, a fascinating, very, very emotional Rashomon. You know, the talkbacks in the articles in the Haaretz and Wired, people and in Facebook, very emotional.
Yeah, thinking about unhappy families, as he were talking about. So I think it's like Rashomon in every unhappy family around the world. We can find such stories or contradicting narratives or whatever, and a lot of complexity. And sometimes we cannot decide, and we shouldn't decide. But even if we wanted, we couldn't.
But it was, you know, he described all the tension of a complexity of a family in his literature, but nobody entered his kitchen, his family's kitchen while he was alive. Yeah. Now he's gone, so you see, it's like literature is very, very dramatic.
This narrative, I think it was so interesting. It circles back to the very beginning of the film, when Amos was asked to summarize his literature, and he said it's about families. And he said, and what about two words? Unhappy families. So it's exactly what the two of you had just been talking about. I'd like to thank both of you, Yair and Qedar. I'd like to thank you for a wonderful conversation about this marvelous new film. I want to again encourage people to see it March 8th to 14th. In the chat, we have placed our website, and you can get more information about the film and all the other films that we're presenting. Excuse me. I'd also like to thank the audience for being here so early in the morning and for asking the questions that you did. So thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.
And please check out our festival starting March 1st.
Thank you. Thank you, Devin. Thank you. Bye-bye.
תודה רבה.